Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kim Lockhead. I'm VP of Marketing here at Knowi. And with me, I have Lorraine Williams, who is our head of product. And today we're going to go through our Q4 product update. So we're going to be covering everything that we've added to the product in the last few weeks. And Lorraine is going to be doing a demo. Before we get into that, though, just a couple of housekeeping items. So we are recording the webinar, and we will send it out afterwards. So you all are on mute at the moment, but we will have time for an active Q&A at the end of the session. So I greatly encourage you to use the Q&A panel on your screen to type in any questions that you have when you have them, and then we'll get to them at the end. We'll have plenty of time at the end. So with that, I would like to hand it over to the lovely Lorraine to get us going.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Hello. So I'm going to touch on some of the main features that have gone into the product over the last few months, our Q4 update. But before I get into specifics, I did want to just remind you all that full documentation and release notes can actually be found at docs.knowi.com. And all docs are fully searchable. So typing in a keyword or phrase, it usually gets you to the right spot. So if I did this, you would see that you would get results for whatever you're looking for. We actually also deploy weekly. And so this is the best place to go to get up to the minute updates on the product's new feature set. And you will literally select release notes here, and then you can see all of our release notes listed. And you can click on, this is our last release right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into our training account and go from here. So our query capabilities are actually my personal favorite part of the product, and are at the heart of what makes Knowi different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just illustrate some of the things that we've put into the product on the query management side of things. So I'm going to go over to our data sources area. And as you may know, Knowi natively integrates to over 30 different types of data source. We have our NoSQL suspects, usual suspects here. We have relational, warehousing, and then we also have just CSV. You can upload a CSV file, you can paste JSON data, for example, and we also have the ability to invoke a REST API. So no matter what data no matter what technology your data is born from, we can deal with it. We're completely agnostic, and we can also blend across all of these different types of data source. So the first thing I'm going to show you, the first new feature I'm going to show you is the save as query, save a query as draft feature. So in order to do that, I'm going to go head over to my data sources that I already have, and I'm going to select my Mongo data source that I've already set up, and I'm going to add a new query. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Q4. And when you create typically and save a query currently, the system will automatically create the associated results set and corresponding widget. We've now introduced this new save as draft feature, which allows you to save midway through. It might be a multi-join query. It might be something that you need to take a while over, and you want to save as you go. So we now have this save as draft feature, which allows you to save as you go along, and it won't actually create the corresponding data set or any widgets associated with that until you actually select save for sure. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a little Mongo query. I'm going to select my collection. This is an email collection we have here, and I'm just going to point and click and gather a few details. For example, customer, and I'm going to do message type, what type of email it was, and how many emails were sent, for example. As I'm doing this on the query builder side of things, very point and click. On the right-hand side, the query editor, you see the native Mongo query has been generated. This is great because if I don't know native Mongo, not all of us do, then I can just do this point and click. But if I do have my Mongo query already formulated, I could directly paste that in here and not bother with this side of it. So I'm going to preview that query, to make sure that I get some data. So, okay, I've got my customers, my message type, and my number of emails sent. And now I'm going to save as a draft. So now when I go into my query listing, you can see that this Q4 query has actually been saved as a draft. It's flagged as draft. It's obviously very visible. I know that that's a draft right there. So I'm going to go back in here now, and I'm going to go and I'm going to save it for real because I want to do an enhancement to that. And the reason will be apparent later on. So now what I want to do is I want to go in and I want to basically do a join, because not all of my data, unfortunately, lives in Mongo. My email sending activity lives in Mongo, but some of my other data lives in MySQL, for example, the actual customer address information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a join. So I'm going to click here on join, and it's going to ask me for what data source. And my address data is in MySQL. So I'm going to select MySQL. And here now it detects not the collections, but it detects tables. So my address information is in my customer table. And again, I just point and click. And obviously I need my key field, which is customer. And then I want to have my, my street address and maybe my state. Again, MySQL is now auto-generating on this side. If I knew MySQL straight away, I could just paste it in and I wouldn't have to do this. So you have options. Now I need to join this. My initial query was in Mongo. Now I'm in MySQL. I need to join these two disparate data sources together. So I can type it directly in here, my join criteria, or I can use the new join builder feature, which is the next feature I wanted to highlight to you. And what we're doing here is we're allowing you to easily select the type of join. So in this case, it's a very basic inner join. And then on the left-hand side, which is my Mongo query, it will auto detect possible key fields. For me, it will be customer. And on the right side, on MySQL, again, it will be customer. So I'm going to save that join. Again, I could have just typed this directly in, but I wanted to illustrate the join builder functionality. At this point, I'm going to do a preview. And now we can see the left-hand side of this virtual data set that is being brought back is Mongo. But on the right-hand side, this was actually got from MySQL. So as you can see, we've blended together two disparate types of data source. So what I now need to do is, for example, when you're normally doing ETL, the old-fashioned way of doing it was ETL, and you're duplicating data out of, for example, Mongo into maybe a relational database, so you can do visualizations and ongoing analytics on that. You would have your ETL scripts, and then unfortunately what normally would happen is that someone would say, oh, okay, I'm sorry, but I also need, for example, country, and I forgot to tell you. So normally that would be maybe a big deal, but here it wouldn't be. You would need to just go up to your criteria where the section of join that has the country information in it. For example, it was my MySQL join here, where my customer address information was, and I would literally just select country. And when I refresh, then I get my country in there. So it's really, really simple. It's very, very fast. You don't have to do any retrofitting at all. You just go up, you select the new fields, and off you go. So I'm going to save that query right there. So this is my new Q4 query right here. What we also have is, if I go back into that query, as you may or may not know, each step of the query, I have one join here, joining two data sets, data sources. The Mongo query would run first, but then we have the option to do some transformation and aggregation using our own Cloud9QL query language. You can do that at every step of the join, every step of the query. What we've also added, which is new, is the ability to also be able to do it right at the end also. So this is very handy to have that here. Cloud9QL is very, very powerful transformation and aggregation for aggregation purposes. And so now we have the ability to do it from the query as a whole. We also have the ability now to, if you do have joins in your query, to be able to preview the data at each step. Obviously, a lot of the time you need to see your data before you go on to the next step. So if I click on this one, this would bring back basically the Mongo side of the query. And then if I go down here on the MySQL side of things, I select this icon and I can quite easily see the MySQL side of things. So again, very, very handy. And coming soon will be the ability to also reorder the where the joins actually take place. That's coming very, very soon. Moving on to another feature, if I save that here, we also have the ability to see audit history. So I was a bit quick, so I'll do that again. For that query that I just created, if you select this little history icon here, you can see the list of changes that have happened on that query. So you can see that, you know, I went in a couple of times. That was my original query, and then I did change it a couple of times. And we now have the ability to revert back to a particular version that you'd had previously in case you made a boo-boo. So that is also a new feature that's just been put in. So I'm now going to move over from the query management side of things to query filters. So I'm going to go to my query list page here, and if I go to airline tweets, in here on the query filters, we've added in the ability to auto sample fields for filters. So if I go into the airline sentiment, if I wanted to filter on airline sentiment, for example, then I can say that it equals, and now it will sample the data for me. So it's helping me out. I don't necessarily have to remember what airline sentiment values exist in my data set. It will sample them for me. And we also have the ability, if you don't want to use that, to be able to have suggestions from an external data source. So because we're sampling right here, sometimes, or maybe if, for example, you were talking about countries, for example, and we might not in our sample have every single country in the world listed in this value in this drop down. You could have an external or a different data set that had a complete set of countries, and you could select from that, and then that will go into your query. So we've also enhanced this whole the way filters works right here. If I go back to data sources, another feature that we've added is the ability to have access control lists. And so what we allow now is the ability to create white and black lists of data source assets, tables, collections, indexes, for example. This will allow the data source creator to specify those assets available to subsequent queries. You might not want everything available for queries, only a subset. The data sources that we support right now are Elasticsearch, Oracle, and our own Knowi Elastic Store. And it's as simple as clicking on the collection or index that you're interested in and moving it over to the whitelist, and you might say that that's available, but this one actually is not available. And to move them back, you would just click on them and you'd move this here. So that's another feature that we've added in recently. If I move over to the alerts section, one of the things that we've added in right now is the ability to also alert to a Slack channel. Now, if you're not familiar with alerts, what this allows you to do is asynchronously monitor your data. And once the data hits a certain criteria that you would enter in here, which is our Cloud9QL language, very SQL-esque type language, you would enter it in there, and once it hits that criteria, or that criteria is met, then it can do something. At the moment, you can send an email and you can attach the data to that email if you wish. You can also invoke an API into another system and also pass in some of the data that you've collected from this criteria here. And we also allow you to now communicate with a Slack channel. So we've always had the ability to monitor and send alerts once this trigger is met, obviously via email or API. So now you can also do it via Slack. When the condition is triggered, we'll send a message to a predefined channel that you configure, including the attachment of full data or conditional data after Cloud9QL. If you have any Cloud9QL transformation or post-processing on that data, we would send that if you wished. And then to complete setup, you would need to just authenticate Knowi to your Slack workspace, which will then enable Knowi to access the workspace channels, post messages, and upload files as an application user. I'm now going to move over to the reports, the email reports. We have added a little bit here on the reports section. Any dashboard that you have currently is available to be emailed on a schedule. This is you would do it from this screen right here. What we've actually added in though on this is the ability to also filter the data that's contained within that report. So you might have one report defined that goes to multiple people, but depending on who the audience is, you want to tailor the data within that report. And you can do this by basically, if you're running a real-time query, it would be at runtime, or if you're doing it on the cache results, you would do it on the query results. But what we're saying here is whichever route you do, it's the same thing. It's the same report that's defined once, but can be reused many times across different people. So you might say that, for example, if you had a sales rep, you might say that, you know, sales region, if there was a token in your query that you ran, a sales region, and this particular rep, when they log in and get the report, can only see the region data for the West region, then this is how you specify that. This is really how you can tailor what people can see within a particular report itself. And you can add more than one filter, obviously, to this. So this is very, very flexible. It's sort of saving you time. You can just create once and reuse many times across different personas within your company for your particular audience. So I'm going to go to the main dashboard back here and go over some of the grid analyze features that we've added in. So we have made a number of usability enhancements. So for example, this is what we call a widget or a visualization. This is also a widget or a visualization. So if I go to this widget right here, we now have the ability to view statistical data for numerical columns, so or for any column actually. So if I go into analyze mode, I can look and see what all my columns are, and you can see this little icon here. It will give me, if I click on it, it will tell me that this column is numeric, and there are 3 distinct values, and there are none missing, and what the mean and standard deviation is, and it gives me a little distribution curve here too. So I can do that for any column. This is a string. There's some sample values and how many distinct and how many are missing. So it just gives you a bit of an idea of what your data is up to. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go for this one. I'm going to go to settings. And we have added in the ability on our aggregation. In settings, you can come to an area which says aggregation. And in here, you can then perform aggregations on this grid that then shows up in the visualization itself. This is a grid visualization. It's just the data. Sometimes you just want to see the data. And so you would come into here, and I might say, I want to do an aggregation on tweet ID. And I might just want to see, you know, how many tweets have I had, for example. So if I save that and go back in, if I go down here, you'll see that basically I have 100. And I can do that for every column. I can do a sum, a max, a min, an average, a count, whatever, for every column. So it just gives you that little bit of summary information at the bottom of your widget. While I'm staying on this, we'll go into formatting for each column. So for example, if I choose let me see, the date here, if I select on this one, if you click on the little circle there, you'll see a list of options that are available, one of which is the column stats as well, which we got to from Analyze Grid also. It's also available on the widget. But you can also see that we can format cells. So this is a date field. and it allows you to specify what type of date you wish to show. For each column, you can also decide whether or not, if it's a number, how you want to display that, or a currency, what currency value you want to put in there, or if it's a percentage, and so on. So we're moving a lot of the formatting options to actually the grid itself, and allow the user themselves to display the widget how they want to see the widget. So let me see. We have the ability right now to resize columns. So, you know, you can make this smaller. Excuse me. For example, so you can resize your columns and that will persist. And we also have in the conditional formatting that I just showed you right now, we added in a does not equal. That wasn't there before. That was an oversight that we put back in. So we now, you know, if you have a condition that does not equal, then you can do it there. So let me try one right now. So I can say that if I do the retweet column, retweet count, and I can say conditional formatting, if it doesn't equal the value of 1, then color it, I don't know, blue. And there we go. So this is really handy if you want to specify or immediately see what your data is doing if it's in a grid format. So there we go. We've also made several enhancements to our Cloud9 QL feature. Obviously, it's a powerful tool that allows you to do post-processing, aggregation, and transformation, as I've said before. So if I go to this mode here, then you can see that if we go to add function, we've added a new function in, which is called number format. So for example, I have, let me see before I start this, we have, for example, or retweet count. Let's do that, retweet count. We'll pick on that one. So let me say I want to add a new column into that one, and I'm going to call it new count. And what I want to do is I want to reformat that number. Retweet count is an integer, and I want to reformat that. So if I type number, you'll see it's highlighted here that there's a number format field. So then what I can do is I can select that, and I can put in, well, what field am I wanting to reformat? And then what format do I want it to be? And I want it to be to 1 decimal place, for example. So let's try that. And then you see there's a new column been added, and it's just reformatted that 4 to a 4.0. We also have in Cloud9 QL, I'm going to go to the docs to show you this one, a new parse function. So if your data is a JSON string, then you can parse that out, and it can be converted to an object, so you can manipulate it more. And there's an example here of how you can do that. So obviously our name, our profile was a JSON string, and we've basically been able to parse that out and then get at the actual information that we want right there. So again, look at our docs and you can get all the information on that. Really, really powerful though. And the C9QL can be used at the query level, at the widget level, at the grid level, everywhere. So you can use it in different spots depending on your use case. The other thing that we have is an if null option. So if I can go into, let me just dismiss that, and I'll just go back to a query. I'll just go into this one. Okay, so in my Cloud9 QL, I also have another. So I can say select star, and then I can say if null, and then I might say customer, then not applicable, for example. So what I'm saying there is get all of this stuff, but if customer actually is null, then substitute it with not applicable when it's in the grid. I don't want nulls, I want something else placed in there. So again, you can do that here, you can do it on the grid itself, you can do it in the widget itself. It's up to you where you do it, but it's very, obviously Cloudline QA is a very, very powerful tool that we have within our system. And the other thing that we introduced finally is support for a couple of new data sources. We've added support for Apache Hive and also Couchbase 5.0, which includes support for role-based access control. So with that, I'd like to hand back over to Kim for a Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Lorraine. So just a reminder, everybody, if you open up your Q&A panel, you can type in your questions. So we have a couple questions already. So one on, Lorraine, on the grid formatting changes. So, you know, you showed how you can change the date format or change it from a number to a currency or whatever. Do those formatting changes reflect anywhere else, or is it just in the grid? So like if they're emailing it, does it reflect in the email report or
Yes, it would reflect in the email report, so it would reflect there. But if I changed it here, that if this field is used in another widget or somewhere else, then it wouldn't reflect there. So it's persisted on a widget basis. But yes, if you were emailing this out, it would reflect there.
Okay, great. So, and then on the filtering, and this might be a bit too in depth to answer, but do you, because we have a number of ways you can do filtering. So we have at the dashboard, we have the widgets, we have at the query. Do we have any sense of like best practices of when to add the filters, depending on what type of filtering you're doing, if it's at the user level or at the data level?
Yeah, you know what? I tend to try to create once and reuse many times. So for me, if I know that my source data is going to be used throughout different widgets and throughout different dashboards, then I tend to not filter at the query level. I get my superset of data initially, and then I will filter later on, because that means that I have all my superset of data in one go. It's just that the overhead is done once. And then I can tailor downstream. If I filter too early on, then I might have to have another query to get the stuff I filtered out. So that's just a personal preference. There's no right way to do it, but that's how I do it.
All right, great. And then lastly, on the last question I have anyway, please, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in, is on just on the Couchbase 5.0. So I know we haven't released it yet, but there is a plan to support the new analytics layer that's in Couchbase 5.0?
Actually, we actually do support the analytics layer. I didn't mention that. Yes, we already support that, and it's already in. So yes.
Oh, right. We'll see.
Yeah.
I learned something.
Yes. No, we do. We support it already. It was implemented about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So for those of you who have Couchbase, if you're looking to upgrade to 5.0, they've added a very powerful sort of analytics portion to it that you can have a couple choices now. You can create the nickel queries as you would do today, or you can leverage that analytics layer as well. So we give you a couple of options there, but obviously that's for Couchbase users only. So that looks like it. We apparently gave them all the information they need, not too many questions today. So again, as a reminder, you will get the recording in your email probably in the morning. And then you can always ping us on support if you have any other questions or would like to go into anything in more detail. So I certainly appreciate everybody being here today, and have a great rest of your day or great evening. Thank you.